Greetings everyone, this is the Questing GM. So I'm back with another entry into our Curse of Strahd campaign as a player, and this will be session 2. So we played this on the 16th of June 2019, and where we last left off is basically our group had just solved a big cult that was hiding underneath a mansion, and then we were led into the mansion by two children who turned out to be ghosts. And we sort of just had to resolve the whole mystery about finding what happened to the children, what happened to the parents, and then that led us down to underneath the mansion where there was an entire complex where the cult was sort of preparing for sacrifices made to someone called Strahd from Zarovich, because we found that from a letter. And so, and basically after we defeated the shambling mound that was at the bottom of the mansion, that was where the session ended for session 1. So session 2 picked up right immediately after that. Is that we decided we had to think about what we wanted to do moving forward, right after that. And also I forgot to mention that after we finished at the end of session 1, the cliffhanger was that we actually saw a man in voluminous black cloak outside the house, and he just sort of turned into a bat and just flew away. So that was actually the cliffhanger where we ended with session 1. And in session 2, it's about a month since we played session 1. So I guess as players we needed a little bit of warming up, and we decided to get everyone's head back into the game and all that. And so there was a little bit of discussion of happening, what did we want to do as a party after session 1. And the context that we had, or the pejorative that we had, was that we were still under the impression that we were supposed to be looking for a caravan that went missing somewhere in the Forgotten Realms, and we are still not the wiser that we are actually have transported ourselves into Ravenloft, particularly into the village of Barovia. So we still haven't really figured all that out. Like, none of the NPCs has really given out a clear distinction that we are not exactly in the Forgotten Realms, and we're still having that impression that we still have to find that missing caravan, whatever means we can. But before we stepped out of the mansion, we decided to take a long rest because the fight with the shambling mound and exploring the whole complex really drained our resources a lot. So after we did a long rest, and then we decided to step out from the mansion, and we started looking for any kind of traces that could lead us to the caravan, and there were tracks of the caravan that was leading into deeper parts of the village. And we followed it, and we found it. We had actually encircled around a place called Bildrav's Mercantile. So it was basically a shop, and it was the middle of the night because of our long rest. And we just basically knocked on our doors, and we entered into the shop, and we were speaking to Bildrav. And the first thing that we needed was to get supplies. And lo and behold, as soon as we started talking about what we wanted to buy, which included rations and ammunitions, because we had used quite a bit of our arrows during the previous fight, we found that the prices that was in Bildrav's Mercantile was actually 10 times more than the normal value that was found in the player's handbook. So at least this is what the DM tells us, that he was selling for that price. And any attempts to haggle with him ended up with Bildrav saying, like, if you wanted it, you would be able to pay for it. So fortunately enough, we actually managed to we had some treasure that we managed to get from the Death House mansion. So we sold it off, and I think we got nearly about more than 1,000 gold pieces worth in terms of new loot. So we actually had to use that money to resupply our rations and our arrows. And at the same time, we asked a few questions here and there, but I don't remember Bildrav being very particularly helpful in terms of answering any of our questions. Like, even when we and because we saw that there was evidence that the caravan that we were looking for actually had encircled around his place, we thought that, hey, maybe where the caravan went. And he said that we should actually go to the tavern that was nearby, called the Blood on the Wine. So when we entered into the Blood of the Wine, and en route, when we were going to the Blood of the Wine, we hear a couple of strangers walking past us, and they were like mentioning this person's name, Ishmak, and saying that they were having some doubts at whether he could do the job right, which we weren't sure what exactly the job was. But they gave him a nickname calling him Ishmak the Lesser. So that impression pretty much stuck onto us. Like, okay, so whoever this Ishmael person is, not a lot of people think very highly of him. Uh, and then we entered into the Blood and the Wine, and that's where we saw that there was a barkeep. There was a table seated by three gentlemen who were very brightly lit, brightly dressed, as our DM described it, and they had bangles around them. And we had one more stranger sitting alone on a different table, and the rest of the tables around the tavern was basically empty. So we basically just asked around the barkeep, and we were like asking him, like, we were looking for a caravan, and we were wanting to know where we are, and we somehow managed to ended up talking with the lone stranger. Oh yeah, we wanted to buy some wine for ourselves to liquidate the tongue a bit, but this Ishmael fellow who was the man alone on the table came up and like decided to pay for our drinks, and he invited us over to his table to have a little bit of conversation, and it turns out that he actually needed uh, people like us, and apparently he seems to have a very either he was particularly looking for adventurers, or he was looking for people who enter into Ravenloft unknowingly. And I think we didn't pick up on the clue that we were supposed to ask him exactly where are we, and what's this whole thing, this whole business about the mist, and drilling into the idea that we are no longer in Faerun, and we are now in Ravenloft. But in any case, Ismark basically just explained his story, and we did ask him a bit about how is it that we could get out from Barovia, and he pointed to the Visitanis, that the Vistani people, who we had no idea at the time was the three gentlemen who were dressed in bright colors and bangles, that they had some means of a potion that you could drink it, and it would transport you out of Barovia. And he also mentioned that the caravan that we were looking for actually was headed. He directed it to a place called the Surpool, and we had no idea where it was. But that was a sort of like next destination that we were quite sure to go. And I think we did talk to him. We did ask him about Strahd von Zarovich, because we found the letter and say, hey, does this name ring any particular bell to you, or does it have any significance in where we are right now? And he said that the Vistanis may have. And he said that if there's a way that we needed to get out, was actually through the Vistanis, and the Vistanis actually, and according to Ismark, the Vistanis might have made some kind of deal with Strahd that allows them to travel between Barovia and other places. So that was kind of our ticket way. We felt that was our ticket way out. Like, if we had to go to this Surpool to find the caravan, then the only way we could do that was to actually be able to leave Barovia, and to be able to do that we had to talk to the Vistanis. But so then we approached and then Ishmael started telling us his side of the story, like what he needed us for. Basically, he was saying that he has a sister named Irina, who has already been bitten twice by a vampire, most probably Strahd, and he's trying to put her into safety, and to take her to a place called Valaki, or possibly another place called Kursk. Valaki is a town where he says that there's proper forms of protection, in terms of palisades and town guards, or the other place, Kirks, which is a village which is supposedly has never been attacked by vampires before. And Irina has there has been many attempts to try to secure Irina in the family mansion, but turns out that when the Ishmael and Irina's father, who was the previous mayor of the town, was actually killed by werewolves. So Irina has pretty much been barricaded inside the house ever since, and Ishmael has kind of like had to take on his father's role, unwillingly, and doesn't seem to be able to be out for the job, so to speak. And so there was this negotiation and discussions about the deal, like if you want us, because we are still we still believe that our main mission is to find the caravan and escort it back to wherever we escort it back to. I believe it was Baldur's Gate. But if we want to take up this job of Ishmael's of protecting Irina to bring her to Valaki or Kirk's, that would be like another job, and we were much more willing to discuss about payment and contracts and that sort of thing. And then we decided that okay, before we could commit to whatever it was that Ishmak wanted us to do, we thought that we should talk to the Vistanis, and Ishmak then pointed out that the three strangers who were sitting on the other table were actually Vistanis. So we talked to the Vistanis, but they were very hostile in terms of attitude, not necessarily in physical behavior. And we decided that and we asked them about the ways of getting out, and they say, oh yes, we have a potion for that, and they were basically selling it for like 100 GP each. And there were 6 of us at the party, so we definitely did not have that kind of money to sprinkle around. And we felt, and one of us did an inside check to sort of sense that the Visanis were basically not were not intending to be helpful at all in any case. Like in any kind of answer in any kind of questions that we had for them, they were just not interested in helping. So that definitely gave a very bad impression. That at least gave my character a bad impression of the Vistanis. Like these are basically just jerks. Even though they may own the Blood on Wine tavern itself, which we later learned. So we basically just said, okay, let's just screw them, and let's just forget about the Vistani's help of getting out of Ravenloft, basically. And in a sense that if we escorted Irina, we would have passed by the Serpool anyway. So maybe on the way we could have just gone to the Serpool and find our caravan, and then we will be off. And we were even entertaining the thought that we would even leave Irina in the Serpool and let the Vistanis there protect her and take care of her. And since maybe they had some sort of connection with Strahd, and maybe Strahd wouldn't abduct Irina under the Vistanis protection. So as we left the tavern, we heard some sobbing. And actually, we heard this sobbing and moaning since we left the mansion, even before we went to the mercantile shop. And we decided that okay, let's just investigate this sobbing and crying for once, and let's see what's going on, even though that would probably be against better judgment. And we found that this sobbing belonged to a woman named Mary, who had just lost her daughter by the name of Gertruda. And she was carrying some sort of malformed doll. Mary was clutching into some sort of malformed doll that had this tag that says, "It's no fun, it's no Blinsky." And then we found, and then Mary wasn't particularly helpful in terms of the details of how Gertrude went missing, other than the fact that Mary went drinking and left the teenage daughter alone in the house, and when she came back, the daughter was gone. And I think he has been gone for a week or something like that. And this is gonna be setting a very interesting pattern that we recognize in Barovia. That basically every parent in Barovia can all be blamed for negligence and bad parenting. Like we've already that's Mary, who lost her daughter because she went do the most irresponsible thing of drinking. And then after that we decided to just hop on and look for Irina and meet our client, so to speak. We went to the mansion and we found it was run down. When we met Irina, we found that she didn't resemble in any way or form to her brother, because she had auburn hair compared to Ishmak's golden hair. And then she was initially hostile to us at first, but then we managed to convince her that we were sort of on her side, in the sense that once we explained to her that we've solved the cult mystery in the death house. So she sort of trusted us. And then as we were talking to her, she led us around. At some point she led us around in the house, and then we found that her father, who was killed by werewolves, was actually still lying around the house, and he hasn't been buried yet. So we were the whole party was sort of disgusted by the whole thing, and we would say no, we're gonna have to take this body out, and we're gonna have to give it proper burial. And we know that giving proper burial in as far as our character's experience in Ravenloft is concerned, is that it leads to good things. Bodies deserve their proper rights given to them. So we took the body and we brought it to a nearby church in Barovia, and we noticed there was a symbol on the church. One of us probably made a successful religion check, and we actually found that that's actually a symbol of Latender, but an old version of that symbol. So that was confusing, because we thought that at least for my character, or at least as me as a player, I felt that, you know, that meant that we're still in Faerun. Otherwise, you know, what's a simple Latender doing here? Uh, and then we decided that, you know, then and Irina said, okay, if you wanted to bury the father, we had to go, you know, to the graveyard behind the church. And before we wanted to do that, you know, one of the players suggested that maybe it was a good idea to just, you know, give a courtesy call to the priest who runs the church, just to let them know that, hey, we're going to your graveyard just to bury somebody. And the moment when we started knocking on the door and the priest came out to us, and he was very suspicious because he sort of didn't like he didn't seem too concerned about what we were going to do. He didn't ask any questions, and we heard some moaning going on, and so that, you know, that just basically ticked off the entire party about it. And we tried knocking a few more doors, there was no response, and I felt, and my character, who is actually a monster slayer ranger with a favorite enemy as undead, felt that something was amiss, and that maybe the priest was actually hiding something, and got a little bit frustrated of people crying all over the place. So I basically kicked the door down, and we manhandled the priest, and we sort of just went to the source of the moaning that was coming from within, and we found a trap door. And that's where the priest sort of confessed that underneath the trap door was actually his son, and through the trap door we could hear moaning and shouting and yelling that this son of his was actually, you know, calling out, wailing out for blood. And that immediately just ticked us off that that his son is obviously a vampire. So my character, you know, being a monster slayer, say that the only way to, you know, you can't appease a vampire, so the only way to appease a vampire is to put them down. So I sort of recommended that the party go down there and slay the vampire, and you know, the party was sort of confused, like, why is the priest of Latender, the Morning Lord, harboring his son who is a vampire, and the priest sort of had a motivation that he wanted to be able to change his son back into a human from vampirism, and that's obviously not going to work. So we all went down there. We had a tough fight. It was the only fight in the entire session against the vampire, which turns out to be a vampire spawn according to the DM. And you know, we defeated it. It was a tough fight for a party of 6 at level 3 against a vampire spawn. Then after we managed to put it down, we put a stake through its heart. We killed it permanently. Then after that, we returned and we buried Irina's and Ishmak's father. Buried his remains. Took a bit of time. And during the burial, we witnessed a procession of ghosts that appeared out from the graveyard, and they were marching out from Barovia up to the up to a hill to where Castle Ravenloft is supposedly been. And after the whole procession, and the priest came and said come and say the final rites for Irina's father, we asked him about the ghost, and he sort of explained to us that it was actually something like a mob that was raised by a wizard, and you know, between the village folks of Barovia, there were also some of the outsider adventurers like ourselves who joined the mob, and they went up to Castle Ravenloft. But apparently the story didn't end very well. So basically, I will assume they were all slain, and they were all buried in the very same graveyard that we were. And so we basically agreed that, you know, we were going to leave Barovia. We were going to head over to the Serpool, and maybe even the next town where we were supposed to drop Irina off. So we had to make preparations, and we had to rest after the fight with the vampires to, you know, be ready to move on to leave Barovia. And we also spoke to the priest about Irina, and the priest sort of revealed that Irina may not actually be the biological daughter to their father, and so therefore it's not exactly a sister to Ishmak. And the priest sort of theorized that Irina may actually be holding a soul of a woman named Tatiana, and for whatever reason, Strahd is actually trying to get his hands on that soul. And you know, he may have attempted because, you know, Irina has already been bitten twice, and for whatever reason that Irina hasn't been slain for that, or turned into a vampire, or Strahd hasn't successfully captured her this Titania soul. We don't know why. But in any case, the priest advised us that we should actually take Irina as far away from Castle Ravenloft and Barovia as possible. So basically, everything just fell into place, and we decided that was where we needed to go next, and that's what we needed to do. So we rested in the church, and the next morning, when we were about to leave Barovia, the party saw a an old lady and an old lady pushing a cartwheel full of pastries, and a man left, came out from a house with a little boy, and he basically traded the boy for a loaf of bread, and that really ticked the entire party off. Like, we were just watching, uh, children selling right before our very eyes, and so some of the party members just went ahead and said, no, this is not right, this shouldn't be happening. We stopped the old lady from taking the child away, even though the old lady was insistent on saying that the child was not being sold to her, but rather was being told to follow her. And we confronted the father, only to find that the father has has taken a bite off the bread and has entered some sort of high mental state. So it was probably something in the bread that was going on. And one of our party members, our goblin battle master, took a bite at it, failed his constitution save, and then he also was basically he was mechanically unconscious for a good 5 hours. And so that the whole party was just on edge, like this. There's just something definitely going wrong in this place, and that's another sign of negligent parenting. So we tried to convince the hag to sort of reveal to us what is exactly in the pastry, and why is she been going around selling these pastries to get children. And there was no answer forthcoming. So basically, the party attacked the old lady, but she disappeared the moment even before we could strike. So basically, we had a parent who was rendered unconscious and basically useless to the boy. So we basically gave the boy up to Ishmak to say that you can take care of the kid, while we take Irina over to the Serpool. And so as we were traveling, we left Barovia, and as we were traveling on this along this road called the old Slavic road into a forest called the Slavic Woods, and that's where we were just set upon by a gaunt figure who was crawling on all fours, and the DM described it to us as a humanoid. We were not sure was it male or female, but basically he was crawling on all floors, and he was rattling, and basically the ground just burst out with moving twigs, and that was the other combat that we had for that session. So we basically we easily put down the twigs, and we basically slayed the madman, or at least we probably an NPC of some kind, and that's kind of where we ended the session for the day. So session 2, there was a lot. The session took about I guess the session took nearly about 4 hours to complete, and there was a lot going on, a lot more than session 1, and because there was a lot of conversations going on, a lot of role playing, a lot of asking questions and not getting the right answers. So probably that was a little bit frustrating at first, or maybe because we were not asking the right questions, or maybe we didn't know how to interact with the people, and we were, for the most part, I felt that we were for the most part brushed off by the NPCs, and we are not sure was that intentional in the adventure, or there was just being we were just being very annoying to the NPCs that we met. But in any case, I think we are moving towards a certain direction now, and session 3 will probably find us at some point in the Serpool. We're not sure if there will be any more random encounters along the way. But I think this is the first session, and this is just the second session, right? And this is the first session where we actually play Curse of Strahd, the actual Curse of Strahd, rather than the Death House. So I guess there's still a lot of questions that we haven't we don't have answers to, but we'll figure I think we'll figure that out very soon in the next session. Uh, so yeah, combat hasn't. I mean, combat wasn't particularly difficult, not compared to the first session. And I guess as a party, we might be gelling a bit better in terms of we are knowing each other's play styles and role playing motivations for our characters. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of next, and there's obviously a bit more things to play on. So yeah, so I guess that's basically all I think. I will recap. I have to recap and feel about session two of Curse of Strahd. Uh, nothing particularly scary at this point. I would say, not in terms of horror elements, but definitely the plot is starting to move, and I think that's as good as way to have a session, like even though there's no combat and heavy emphasis on role play, but at least the plot's moving and we're going somewhere with this. So I guess that'll be all for this entry in the Curse of Strahd quest log, and I'll be back with the next one when we are ready for session 3, which would probably happen, I believe, in about 2 or 3 weeks from now. So we'll see what happens then. And so this is the Questing GM signing out for now. Good night.